Well, hello everyone. Ogre27 Kane here today, and we're gonna do another episode of 10 Great Nintendo Switch Titles, Part 5. This is the Limited Run Games Edition. Now you'll have to excuse me in this video as I'm pretty sick right now and my voice is a little off. But don't let that bother you as I got 10 great limited run games to show you here. Technically I have 11 in my collection, but one of them, the Mummy Demastered, does not like to capture, so I couldn't get that one for you. But don't let that hold you back, as I still have 10 really cool titles to show off here, and some I really enjoy. Let's give that shout out though to The Mummy Demastered, as it is one of my favorite Metroidvanias. So let's move on now to number 10. So in here at number 10, we have Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And this is one of my favorite RPGs of all time. This is one of BioWare's actual masterpieces and the game that really put them on the map. Back on the original Xbox, this game was a feature for all the really cool animation and cutscenes it had, as well as a massive universe to explore and tons of gameplay and hours. One of the things I really enjoy about this game is how customizable it is. You can really be a good Jedi, bad Jedi, not even use lightsabers if you want, just stick to blasters. You can go to certain worlds and you can project yourself as good or bad in either world, and you can influence the dialogue and the story, if you will. So I think one of my favorite things about this is that this is a direct port of the original Xbox version. Yes, they upped the resolution to 1080p and they gave us a much better and more stable frame rate. It still is 30 frames, but it is a lot better and more reliable. Now, this game never really truly depended on any of those issues, as the game itself is a turn-based RPG and it really just uses dice rolls to manipulate everything. But if you enjoy RPGs, this is one of the best ones to go back to, and this really shows what BioWare used to do right. I hope some way, shape, and form BioWare gets back to these roots and really starts giving us these kind of games again, because frankly I've been really turned off by the last 10 years or so of them. But I don't really mind having an old game come up, and having something like this that really does bring back nostalgia for me and gives me a reason to play an old game again is always worth it. I highly enjoy this game and recommend it. So let's move on now to the next one. So in here at number 9, we have the Blaster Master Zero remake. And this was one of the best games originally on the Switch. It was also one of the first games. I didn't just buy this game digitally, of course I had to buy it physically, and it really does have all the old Metroidvania elements you expect. Now, it's hard to go back and play this game on the NES today, as some of the UI and some of the button controls are a bit clunky and the game is a little bit more difficult. But this remake really invigorated and brought this game back to the future to me, and I enjoyed it so much I ended up buying the second and third ones. I have the whole collection physical here, and I'm going to show it off to you guys, because I think these games are something that you should go check out. Whether you only spend the 10 or 15 bucks on it digitally, or whether you try to break the bank and get a limited run version, totally up to you. But at the end of the day, Inti Creates is one of the best studios to produce for the Nintendo Switch. So this effort, in my opinion, honestly sums up the best of the NES's library, and I would love to see Inti Creates go back and take a bunch of the old titles from the NES and update them and bring them up. There are certain games like Rygar that could really use the treatment, the coat of paint, and the notoriety, if you will. I love a lot of NES games, but frankly they're impossible to play now, and it's really cool to see new developers go in and add a new twist to a game like this. This game has a lot more content than the original NES version, and frankly, it's really good content, so let's move on. So here at number 8 we have Time Spinner, and this is a fantastic Metroidvania. Honestly, the only downside to this game is how short it is. You will probably get so invested in it, just like I did, that you beat it in 1 or 2 sittings. And that's kind of depressing considering how much work and effort went into this game. Don't let that turn you off though, because it's a fantastic game with a great vibe, and it has really fun, cool, and customizable combat. Having all the different options with all of your different little magic orbs really makes a big deal, and it has a certain Castlevania vibe to it too. There's a medieval-esque, if you will, fantasy base to it, and a lot of the creatures are things that we remember from other stories that we grew up with. The writing in this game is a little loose. It's not really meant to be the most impactful story, but it does a really good job for what they're trying to do, and the story itself flows and has a good pace. At the end of the day, when you want to play a game like this, you don't want the story to interfere too much because the action is really the highlight, and Time Spinner kind of sums this up. I really enjoyed this game, and I hope you do too, and I know it's super expensive now, so buying a physical may not be an option for you. I don't know if this game is digital on anything, but it's worth looking out for. If you enjoy Metroidvanias, this is definitely a top 20 on any list, and one that I think goes down as one of the flashier games from the original Switch lineup. I personally bought this game a little bit after it came out, and I really didn't know what I was in for, but I'm happy I did. This studio is small, but they're very talented. They have great writers, great animators, great everything. So let's move on now to the next. Well, here at number 7, we have Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2. And I'm sorry if I startled you with that lightsaber sound there at the beginning. I just really love that, and I think it's one of the coolest intros ever. This game is the sequel, if you will, to Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, but it does deal with a different set of characters and a different set of circumstances. It takes place at a different time period as well. Now, your character itself develops very slowly in this game because it really is kind of a blank slate, whereas in the first game, you had a clear idea of what you were trying to achieve. This game is a lot more gray, if you will, less black and white, and it really does emphasize your choices between good and evil and how you want to become. This Jedi lady, if you see here, she kind of gives you the option and guides you to which way to kind of figure things out, but a lot of it is manipulated with your choices and how you interact with the world. Whether or not you kill somebody, trade with somebody, or help somebody out always impacts your good or evil paradigm. The other really cool thing to this game is that this was made by Obsidian, and this was their take on BioWare's world. A lot of people consider Obsidian to be a superior studio to BioWare, and it really does show the difference between the two games. The highlights of Knights of the Old Republic 1 really are in its story and pacing, and the highlights of Knights of the Old Republic 2 are really in its gameplay and world exploration. There's some really fun elements to this game too that allow you to kind of change the environments, if you will, too, and you can really become an evil person in this game if you want to. I enjoyed this, one of my favorite Star Wars games, and I think you would too. So let's move on to the next. So here at number 6, we have Blaster Master Zero 2. And this game is a bit of a departure as it wasn't built upon any previous games, and they took a lot of the information and knowledge they learned from the first Blaster Master and tried to enhance it, if you will. In my opinion, this is the weakest of the 3 titles, as this one is almost like a boss rush. Yes, you have a lot of different worlds to go explore, but a lot of the worlds are really small, and the interconnectivity amongst them is not great. It's really just go and clear out an area, find a special weapon or power, find another map upgrade, and move on to the next one. I'm kind of disappointed with this, but I get it now because I really don't think that they had a clear vision themselves when they were making this game. They realized that the bosses were really fun in the first game, but they didn't realize how much of an impact the first world made. They tried to do too much with too little, and it came out a little wonky. Now, don't let that turn you off at all, because the combat is still fun in this game, and Sophia, your tank, still does a great job with all of her upgrades and weapons, and it really does incorporate a fun puzzle-seeking element to it too. The thing about this though is you'll see this game, like I do, after you finish it, a little bit more of a boss rush mode, and that's kind of disappointing, especially considering what the first Blaster Master was able to accomplish. I love the world in the first one, and it'll probably go down as my favorite, but this one is definitely the weakest. So, that being said, I recommend buying it digitally if you don't want to break the bank on this game. So herein at number 5, we have Dust, an Elysian Tale. And this game is one of the coolest, funnest Metroidvanias in the whole limited run collection. But it has a major caveat of being stupid expensive. This game runs for between $150 and $250 now, and other than the fact that it's part of their limited collection, their original 20 releases, there's not really any other reason for this to be that expensive. It's a great game, and don't get me wrong, the Metroidvania elements in it are really fun, and I love the combat. The story is well done too, and the guy that created this did it all by himself, so it's pretty fantastic to see what he came up with. But the price point can definitely be a huge turnoff for most people, and I would highly recommend you do a ton of research on this game and find out whether it's worth your time or money to even get into it. Having that physical price the way it is just ridiculous, folks, and as a collector myself, I understand why these valuations go up the way they do, but if I was looking at this from a company standpoint, I would just look at that as money in the bank. Why am I not producing more and taking care of this audience? If the demand is so high that it drives a game into the hundreds of dollars, you would think a company would just do a simple reprint. But whatever, I digress. I think if you enjoy Metroidvanias, this is a solid game and a great one to have in your collection, and yes, it will build value with your collection. But if you're not into that price tag, which I get it, then I might skip on this one. It's still a great game though, and I really recommend it, so let's move on now to the next. So I originally played the Xbox 360 release of this game, and it is quite a bit different. When this game was announced and released with limited run, it's the Wii version, and I had never really fully got into that one. After playing it through now, I realized the control scheme in this game is really cool, and the game really does have a lot of fun and really neat aesthetics to it. The only thing that's disappointing is you don't have the Star Destroyer scene the same way that you did in the Xbox 360 one, and the graphics and animations are quite a bit of a downgrade. All that aside though, this game has a really fun and unique story, and it's one of the few Star Wars games that kind of stands out on its own and still fits into the original trilogy. I really hope that they choose to remake the Star Wars Force Unleashed games sometime soon and bring back Starkiller because he's one of the coolest Jedis in all of Star Wars. This game had a lot of really fun elements to it, a lot of really cool powers if you will, and a lot of really fun exploration. They go to a bunch of different planets and they go all over the Star Wars galaxy, and a lot of the enjoyment to this game is not just the combat and the story and playing the game itself, but also just seeing the Star Wars universe unfold in front of you the way the original trilogy did. Being an old guy like I am now, I'm partial to the old trilogy and it brings back a lot of nostalgia for me and kind of tugs at my heartstrings. This character Starkiller is one of the coolest Jedis that ever lived, and I really hope his story just doesn't disappear and fade into the ether, because it looks like Disney doesn't really care too much anymore to give us these kind of games. So in here at number 3, we have Blaster Master Zero 3. And this game is a bit of a mixed bag as it takes some of the stronger elements from Blaster Master Zero 1 and Blaster Master Zero 2. It's a little bit less of a boss rush and a little bit more of a world exploration type game, which in my opinion is what they should have done all along. It's kind of crazy to see how they change course so drastically between the second and third ones, but it was a welcome course change and it gives it a good amount of variety between the two. The bosses in this game are really cool too, and they're fun to play, and all the different guns and variations of weapons you have really play into a lot of this aesthetic. Yes, the first and second games do this to a point, but a lot of those games are really built on just tanking and throwing the best weapon at the monster. This game really wants you to focus on the puzzle element of figuring out which weapon is more efficient for the area that you're in. You still have all the same elements, and Sophia has a lot of the same upgrades with some really cool new ones. But a lot of that doesn't necessarily impact my decision making on this game, as it's a new game to me and I don't have nostalgia for it. I would rank this game second below Blaster Master Zero 1, and it's definitely better than what Blaster Master Zero 2 was trying to achieve. All that set aside, this is a fun game, and it's worth your time and your money. It's still pretty cheap too for the physical. Next up at number 2, we have Axiom Verge 2. And this game is a sequel to the famous hit of Axiom Verge 1. Thomas Happ did a great job in both games, and this game really is a huge expansion to what Axiom Verge 1 was. It has essentially 2 to 3 kinds of worlds that you explore in different mediums, and the game has a bigger emphasis on cyberspace, if you will. The other really cool thing is that this game has a bit better of a melee aspect to it. It's a lot easier to use those tools and weapons, but at the same time, it really is kind of a downgrade from all the guns that you got in the first one. The first game really made you feel overpowered by the end of it, and this game really just makes you feel like you struggle all the way through it. The momentum and movement in this game's a little different as well, as I guess you could consider it better because you have new abilities like wall clinging and stuff like that, but at the same time, I prefer the first Axiom Verge's movement a little better. I'm a huge fan of both games, and don't get me wrong, this game is worth the money, and if you can still find it fairly cheap, it is definitely worth the pickup. But be forewarned, there were some leftover ideas from Axiom Verge 1 that made their way into this game, and you may like them or you may not, but as far as I go, I consider this game a little bit of a downgrade. That being said, it's still a fantastic game and it's worth your time and effort. I really hope you check this game out, and I hope we support Thomas Happ and his future endeavors, if you will. Well, here at number 1, we have the Castlevania Advance Collection. This features Castlevania Circle of the Moon, Harmony of Dissonance, Aria of Sorrow, and Castlevania Dracula X. These games are all really good, and I love the fact they're all complete on this cartridge. Castlevania Dracula X is a direct port of the Super Nintendo game, which is technically a prequel to Symphony of the Night. This game follows Richter Belmont's story as he's trying to make his way to Dracula and everything that ensues there. I do enjoy this game a lot, but it is a bit of a downgrade from Super Castlevania 4, if you will. The movement and momentum is a bit of a mixed bag, and the game really has a lot of old school NES tropes to it. But let's move on to Circle of the Moon. Now, Castlevania Circle of the Moon is the first GBA Castlevania game we got, and it was pretty much right after Symphony of the Night. It borrows a lot of the same tropes and enemies and movements. The only downgrade to this game is that it's very linear and vertical, and you'll spend a lot of time going up and down in shafts, which is kind of annoying, but it's still worth your time. Let's talk about Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance now. So Harmony of Dissonance is another weird one, as the story itself is not directly in connection with the other games. Yes, it does figure a Belmont, Juiced Belmont, but it's a very different story, and it doesn't really mesh with the old storyline of the original Castlevanias. That being said, don't let it turn you off, because the game has some great mechanics, really fun combat, and an awesome customization system, as well as having all the elements you expect from a Symphony of the Night type title. It's worth checking out. Let's talk about Castlevania Aria of Sorrow now. So in closing, Castlevania Aria of Sorrow is one of the greatest games of all time. GBA or not, this game really does take all the great elements from all the previous Castlevanias and rolls it into a great package. I could gush all day about this game, folks, so thank you for watching this video. It was a blast to make. I upload every single Monday. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. And have a great rest of your day. This is Ogre27Kane, signing out.